Jane had always loved old buildings, their creaky floors, their high ceilings, the faint scent of history clinging to the walls. So when she moved into the Ashwood apartments, she was prepared for quirks. But nothing could have prepared her for the sixth room. It appeared on her third night. She'd been unpacking boxes, the dim hallway light flickering as she carried a stack of books to her bedroom. That's when she saw a door at the end of the corridor, slightly ajar, where there had only been blank wall before. Her stomach knotted. She was sure the building only had 5 units. She'd counted them during her tour. Curious, she approached the door, her fingers brushing the cold, tarnished knob. A draft seeped through the gap, carrying an odd metallic scent. She pushed it open just enough to peer inside. Darkness, thick and impenetrable, as if the room swallowed light whole. The next morning, she called the landlord, Mr. Harris. "There's a 6th room," she said. "At the end of the hall." Silence, then a stiff laugh. "Miss Carter, the building has 5 apartments, always has." When she insisted, his voice turned sharp. "Stay out of places that don't belong to you." That night, passing the hallway again, she found the door still there. But now it was closed, the knob glinting under the hallway light like a challenge. And for the first time, Jane wondered if the room hadn't appeared for her at all, but had been waiting. Jane had barely settled into her new apartment when the nightmares began. At first, they were just muffled sounds, soft, indistinct murmurs that could have been the wind or the creaking of old pipes. But as the nights wore on, the whispers grew clearer, slithering under her door like smoke. They seemed to emanate from the end of the corridor, from the room that shouldn't exist. The 6th room. She'd mentioned it to the landlord, who had laughed it off. For 5 rooms, not 6, he'd insisted, barely glancing up from his paperwork. But Jane knew what she'd seen. A dark wooden door slightly ajar, at the far end of the hallway. Sometimes, a faint glow pulsed beneath it, the same sickly green of rotted leaves. It was Mr. Thompson, the elderly man in 3B, who first noticed her unease. He caught her lingering outside the 6th door one evening, her ear pressed against the wood. "Don't," he hissed, yanking her back so hard she stumbled. His face was ashen. "You don't go near that room." "Not ever." Jane demanded an explanation, but he just shook his head, his dreamy eyes darting toward the door. "It's listening," he whispered, sweat beading on his brow. That night the voices sharpened. They no longer murmured, they've called. Soft at first, then growing bolder, forming words she almost recognized. Jane, a chill clawed down her spine. It wasn't just one voice. There were dozens, layered over one another, whispering her name like a chant. She pressed a pillow over her head, but it didn't help. The voices were inside her now, crawling through her skull, whispering secrets she didn't want to hear. And beneath it all, something else. A sound like scratching, like something trying to get out. Jane had convinced Lisa to stay the night, mostly to prove she wasn't just imagining things. The mysterious room at the end of the hall hadn't appeared again since she first noticed it, but Jane was certain it would. Lisa, ever the skeptic, agreed to humor her, though she spent most of the evening rolling her eyes at Jane's theories. As they settled in for the night, the air in the apartment grew unnaturally cold. Lisa, wrapped in an extra blanket, finally admitted she felt something was off. That's when they heard it. A faint, rhythmic tapping from the corridor, like fingernails against wood. Jane's breath caught in her throat as the door to the extra room creaked open on its own, revealing a yawning darkness. Lisa, braver than Jane expected, grabbed a flashlight and marched toward it. "It's just an old room," she said, but her voice wavered. She stepped inside, the beam of light cutting through the black. Jane waited by the doorway, heart pounding, until Lisa suddenly screamed. The flashlight clattered to the floor, rolling to reveal Lisa backing away from the walls, her face pale with horror. "Theck, there are faces," Lisa stammered, pointing at the peeling wallpaper. "They're moving." Jane lunged forward to pull her out, slamming the door shut behind them. Lisa didn't sleep that night. She sat rigid on the couch, muttering about whispers and shapes reaching for her. By morning she was gone. No note, no call, just an empty space where she'd been. Jane's text went unanswered, and when she called Lisa's phone, it rang from under the couch cushions. Left behind, as if Lisa had never taken it with her at all. Determined to uncover the truth about the strange extra room, Jane spends hours at the local library, poring over old newspapers and city records. Her fingers tremble as she flips through brittle pages, her stomach twisting with dread. The first headline she finds stops her cold. "Family of 4 vanish without a trace. 6th room at center of mystery." The article, yellowed with age, recounts the inexplicable disappearance of the Wilkerson family in 1957. Their apartment, number 6, was the same one now at the end of her corridor. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, just an empty apartment, the dinner table still set, as if they'd vanished mid-meal. The more Jane digs, the darker the story becomes. Whispered rumors from neighbors back then described hearing voices in the walls, laughter that wasn't human. The police dismissed it as superstition, but one name keeps resurfacing: Henry Wilkerson, the father, the only one who wasn't home that night. The records show he returned to find his family gone, and was committed to a psychiatric ward, raving about a door that shouldn't exist. Her blood runs cold when she discovers that the elderly man in the basement, the one who warned her, is that same Henry. He'd lived there ever since his release, watching as new tenants came and went, never speaking of what happened unless forced. Jane's hands shake as she shuts the last newspaper. The room isn't just haunted. It's hungry, and she's next. Jane's hands trembled as she clutched the yellowed newspaper clippings. The ink faded, but the words chillingly clear. The missing family, the unexplained disappearances, all traced back to the 6th room. The apartment's history was a tangled web of fear, and she had stumbled into its center. Determined for answers, she sought out Henry, the elderly man who lived in the building's basement, the lone survivor of whatever lurked behind that door. The basement was dim, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something older, something wrong. Henry sat in a worn armchair, his milky eyes fixed on her before she even spoke. "You've seen it," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves scraping against stone. "The room." Jane nodded, her throat tight. "What is it?" Henry leaned forward, his gnarled fingers gripping the arms of the chair. "A doorway," he whispered. "But not one you walk through. One that walks through you." He explained how the room wasn't part of the building. Not really. It was a haunt, a trap for the curious. The whispers were its lure, the shadows its teeth. "It's hungry," he said, his gaze distant. "And it's been waiting for someone like you." Jane's breath hitched. "Someone like me?" Henry's lips curled into a grimace. "Someone who won't leave it alone." He warned her to stay away, to ignore the whispers, to forget the room existed. But even as he spoke, Jane felt the pull of it, an itch in her mind she couldn't scratch. The fear was there, yes, but so was the need to know, to see. As she turned to leave, Henry's voice followed her, hollow and final. "Go in, and you won't come out. Not as yourself." The door creaked shut behind her, sealing his warning in the dark. But Jane already knew, she wasn't going to listen. The hinges groaned as Jane pushed the door open, the sound echoing unnaturally in the empty corridor. The air inside the room was thick, clinging to her skin like damp cobwebs. Her breath hitched as her eyes adjusted to the dimness. Shadows wreathed along the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The whispers she'd heard for nights on end now swelled into a chorus, overlapping voices murmuring words she couldn't quite decipher. Lisa was there, or at least, what remained of her. A faint, translucent outline of her friend flickered near the far wall, her mouth stretched in a silent scream. Jane's stomach tightened as she reached out, but her fingers passed through the apparition like smoke. Around her, other faces began to emerge from the darkness, hollow-eyed, mouths gaping in terror or despair. The wall beneath her fingertips throbbed as if something alive and hungry lay just beneath the surface. A cold draft snaked around her ankles, and the door behind her slammed shut with a finality that sent a jolt of panic through her chest. The whispers stopped all at once, leaving a silence so heavy it pressed against her eardrums. Then, from the darkest corner of the room, a voice, clear and intimate, breathed her name. "Jane." The shadows surged forward before she could move, coiling around her legs like vines. The walls seemed to lean in, the faces within them stretching their mouths wider, as if in anticipation. Whatever waited in this room, it had lured her in. And now, it was ready to feed. Jane's breath came in sharp, panicked gasps as she turned toward the door, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The moment she stepped inside the room, the air had thickened, pressing against her skin like a suffocating blanket. The door, solid wood just seconds ago, was gone, replaced by an unbroken stretch of peeling wallpaper. She clawed at the spot where it had been, her fingers scraping uselessly against the wall. A low, guttural chuckle echoed around her, seeming to come from the very air itself. Then, the whispers returned, louder now, forming her names: Jane, Janey. The shadows in the room coiled and twisted, slithering along the floor and walls like living things. Faces pressed against the wallpaper, their hollow eyes wide with terror, mouths stretched in silent screams. Among them, she recognized Lisa, her features distorted but unmistakable. Her friend's lips moved soundlessly, pleading, but no words escaped. Cold dread seeped into Jane's bones as she realized the truth. Lisa hadn't just disappeared. She was here, trapped. Then, the entity emerged. A towering mass of shifting darkness, its form flickering at the edges like smoke. A maw of jagged shadow split open, releasing a hiss of frost-laden breath. "You were curious," it murmured, its voice a chorus of the lost. "They always are." Jane stumbled backward, but the floor seemed to tilt beneath her, the walls closing in. The light from the hallway outside dimmed to nothing. She tried to scream, but the sound died in her throat as cold fingers of shadow wrapped around her limbs, pulling her deeper into the room. The last thing she saw were the faces in the walls, Dozens of them now, watching, waiting. The entity's whisper curled around her like a serpent. Stay with us, and then silence. The room stood empty once more, the door reappearing as if it had never left. The apartment fell still, save for the faintest echo of whispers against the walls, calling for the next curious soul.